Hi there. Today, as part of the SCCO's chain reaction, I'm going to be interviewing. Interviewing is probably a bit grand, but I'm going to be talking to Pete Cockhill, who is I've known for many years, is wonderful osteopath and just has a lovely way of transmitting osteopathy, really. So, Pete, I'd like you just to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you chose osteopathy and where you trained.
Okay, so I chose osteopathy. I have to start with this really amazing sliding doors moment, because originally my contact with any kind of manual therapy was having trouble with my back when I was in my early 20s, and I actually went to see a chiropractor, an old doer Scottish chiropractor, who really helped me. And he had loads of interesting things around his room, and he was really interesting to talk to. But he told me, he said, if you want to do this, you've got to go to America. So I looked into it, and it was going to cost thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. And he said, don't train in England. But it was the only way I could think of doing it at that moment. So I ended up going to an interview at the Anglo-European College of Chiropractic in Bournemouth. And whilst I was thinking about that, I was on King's Cross Station at a ticket barrier, and coming the other way was a face of somebody I knew at university in Liverpool in a previous life. And she and I exchanged one sentence each, which was, what are you doing now? And I said, I'm thinking of doing chiropractic. And she said, I'm doing osteopathy. Just like that. So at this ticket barrier, she said, ring the European School of Osteopathy and get a prospectus and come and see me, because she'd already started in the first year. And that was Lucy Smith. And that was that must be now 47 years ago. So that's what I did. So I went down to the ESO and I really liked it. And so that's when I enrolled at the ESO. And I didn't have any sciences. So because I'd done arts at university and things, so I had to go back and go away and do A-level chemistry and A-level biology in 1 year, which the ESO never knew, but I never actually finished them. Anyway, I probably shouldn't say that, but I passed the exam at the end of the first year, and I was allowed to continue. And so I did my undergraduate study at the ESO and became scientific. But I liked the ESO, and I was exposed there to some really interesting influences, primarily, John Wernham's classical osteopathy and its emphasis on rhythm in tissues, and also the art of palpation through Harold Klug in the first 2 years there, introduced us to a new way of, sensing with our hands. And also Robert Lever in the art of specific adjusting. So that was the early basis and inspiration of the osteopathy that I got at the ESO. Right? So, because I've got various sort of really interesting influences at that time, because then when I finished, I managed to go and work for the principal of the college at the time, who was Tom Dummer. And I worked in his practice in London for 2 years, where I was encouraged to develop the art of using specific adjustment technique in the osteopathic approach that he used in a busy West End practice, which was a great learning experience for me. Least of all, trying to handle 26 patients in a day, which was quite a challenge. But that was always finished in Tom Dummer's true style of having a nice glass of red wine at the end of the day. And I understood the importance of the fluid field in osteopathy. Anyway, but great influence in diagnostic, using hands diagnostically and trying to learn the art of understanding from the body what the primary, you always talk to, like you've got to be aware of what the primary lesion was. And that was a really interesting concept to explore. So I worked there for a while, and then I was at the same time working with our good friend and colleague Susan Turner in our own practice, developing the more subtle, to me, what we then called cranial approaches, involuntary mechanism approaches. and beginning to treat children. And I went from there really for a little while, moved out of London, came to Bath, started my own practice. And then I think it was a question of, certain landmarks of people, like we all have people that you meet at a certain time in your practice life and in your career and in your life, that suddenly just in a moment have an influence on you, like game changers, where you turn a different direction, or you have a sensory awareness that's woken up and you start looking at different things for sometimes a long period of time before you.
Who were those major shifts, do you think, those game changers?
Well, the first game changer, which I have to say, although his name was never that revered in osteopathy after that time, was John Upledger, because he was the first person that we were introduced to at Maidstone who was teaching cranial osteopathy. And he had a big influence just because he was bold, confident, stood by his statements, and showed us things that nobody had ever showed us before. So he was, at that early stage, he was very influential for me over a period of 2 or 3 years. Then I got more introduced to the BSO's postgraduate courses, that they ran the 5-day course every year, and ended up very quickly being asked to teach on it, although I was rather shocked because the introduction in those days to teaching on that course was having a curry the night before and being given the course content with no instructions at all. That was my introduction to teaching. But through that, I met, I spent a day with Bob Fulford, which was very enlightening. And like all those greats that came to teach during the 1980s, for me, with Herb Miller, Bob Fulford, and Rollin Becker as well, and just experiencing their hands, all in different ways, expressing this thing that we talked about, the primary mechanism and the breath of life and all those things, and trying to understand what that actually meant. And it, takes a long time for me, for all that. You hear the words, but you don't know what you don't really know what they're conveying something through what they're saying, but you don't actually know what it is, because it's a different realm of sensory experience, really. So they were all really important, and particular times, like Bob Fulford, one particular treatment in a practical session that he gave me, where I understood his, the importance he attached to all those anterior fascia and the first breath and the diaphragm and the figure of 8 that he worked with, and just feeling something through the depth of his palpation. And somehow when you've had that, you kind of try and embody the experience that somebody's given you, really. So there was him. And I think then probably, there was a group of us that did our visits across the pond to visit Anne Wales in the latter stages of her teaching, when she was sharing everything that she possibly could with us, a group of us. And that was just, fantastic experience to have that 8 hours a day, hands-on, just listening to her and her demonstrating. It's really amazing. And of course, James Jealous, who a lot of us have had contact with and have spent time with. And, I have to say, what an amazing teacher. Certain moments, and I'll give you the sentence that he said to me, which made such a huge difference. And in it, there's nothing, but all he said to me once when we were walking through a wood was, the most important thing is you have to find your own relationship to primary respiration. And it was like, okay, so off I go on a track, to find what my relationship is, because nobody can tell you what it is, really. You have to find it. You have to find what it means. And
I'm glad you said that, Pete. This is only like a quick snapshot, because it'd be great. We should spend hours. This would be great. And I think people watching this would love to hear more. So they're going to have to come down to Bath and seek you out.
No, I'm hiding. I'm hiding now. I'm into retirement.
Okay, you're not in Bath. Oh, you're living in Watford now.
Yeah, I'm just moved to South Bristol, near the airport.
Well, Pete, that's been wonderful. And yeah, we look forward to hearing more and sharing all these interviews online. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark.